The stroke during sleep and the late-night meal. No one noticed. It was a peaceful morning in the suburbs of Houston. As the first sunlight peeked through the window, an ambulance quietly pulled up in front of a small house. Mr. Walter, 68, was found unconscious in the bedroom by his wife, Mrs. Linda. He was still breathing. But he couldn't speak. He couldn't move the right side of his body. And the strange thing was, when she shook his shoulder at 6:15 a.m., he just looked at her blankly as if he no longer knew where he was. Doctors confirmed, he had suffered a stroke in his sleep. There had been no warning signs at all. No headache. No dizziness. No fall. Just one night that seemed like any other. But when the children checked the kitchen camera, they discovered something that left the whole family frozen in silence. Mr. Walter had eaten dinner alone at 9:37 p.m. A full meal with cold cuts, white bread, cheese, and a small glass of wine. After that, he sat in his chair for another 15 minutes, then went to bed. Nothing seemed wrong if you only looked at the surface. But for an older person with a history of high blood pressure and fluctuating blood sugar, that was the moment his brain's blood vessels were silently pushed to their limit. No one had warned him. No doctor had ever clearly explained dinner timing. No family member paid attention to the clock when setting the meal. And no one imagined that a meal after 9 p.m. could lead to a day when he could no longer speak. You see, a stroke during sleep sounds like a bolt from the blue. But sometimes, that accident begins with a familiar choice no one ever questions. Could that late-night meal have been the match that lit the fuse for a night full of risk? And if you think a meal after 8 p.m. only affects digestion, wait until you find out what it does to the brain. Just one late-night meal and the brain gets suffocated in the dark. When you go to sleep, you think your body is finally resting. But if dinner happens too late, you've unknowingly forced your brain to work the night shift when it's the very organ that needs rest the most. Picture this, the brain is a loyal night guard. It's been working all day, processing thousands of thoughts, memories, and emotions. And by 8 p.m., it's preparing to shut down, entering recovery mode. But right then, a plate of food appears on the table. You sit down and eat. And the brain is summoned again not to think or reflect, but to manage a crisis of blood flow and hormones caused by a late meal. Eating after 8 p.m. spikes blood sugar. The body must release insulin to manage it. The heart beats faster, and blood pressure rises. And at that point, the brain no longer gets the deep sleep it needs. Studies show, after a late meal, blood flow to the brain decreases, because most of it is redirected to the digestive system. Meanwhile, brain vessels, especially in older adults, become tense and less elastic, like old water pipes being forced to work overtime. You're still sleeping. But your brain isn't. It's running under low oxygen, poor recovery, and rising pressure from your internal organs. It's a condition I call, the brain being suffocated during the night. And if this continues long enough, you don't just lose deep sleep. You start losing memory, alertness. Even a fragile part of the brain is already vulnerable to age. And that's just the first layer of pressure. What comes next is even more silent. Silent pressure when the digestion and blood vessels are both overloaded. Most people think, after eating, lying down for a bit helps with digestion. But the truth is, a late-night meal doesn't just disrupt the digestion, it pulls your brain's entire vascular system into a battle no one saw coming. When you eat late, especially meals rich in protein, carbs, and fat, your digestive system has to work harder at a time it's supposed to rest. The stomach contracts, the liver releases bile, and the pancreas secretes insulin. Every organ stays awake. And to do all that, they need blood. Lots of it. From where? From the very blood that was meant to nourish your brain. In the quiet hours of the night, Instead of blood flowing to the brain to repair neurons, it gets rerouted down to the gut to process a meal your body didn't need at that hour. The brain is left blood deprived, not violently, not dramatically, but silently. It's like lighting a lamp in the desert, but the oil pipe is blocked, flame still burns. But dims. And dims. And then, just when you think you're peacefully asleep, your blood vessels start facing a double pressure, from below, digestion pulling blood downward from within, post-meal blood pressure rising, the heart beating faster. The result? The brain lacks oxygen, and cranial pressure fluctuates, and the smallest vessels, the ones responsible for memory and balance, are the first to suffer. In younger people, the body can recalibrate. But in older adults, where vessels have lost elasticity and plaques are already there, that overload can become the spark for a silent stroke. And sure, the young body might handle it. But what about someone over 60? Why are older adults more likely to suffer a stroke if they eat after 8 p.m.? When I tell my patients, having dinner after 8 p.m. can raise your stroke risk, many are surprised. They think, it's just one meal, how serious can it be? But the truth is your body after age 60 isn't the same as it was 10 years ago. And the brain, and especially its blood vessels, can no longer adapt as flexibly as it once did. In older adults, the biological rhythm begins to shift, melatonin levels rise earlier, the liver detoxes more slowly, the stomach digests more slowly, the autonomic nervous system switches gears more quickly, and after 8 p.m., the entire body is preparing to rest. Blood vessels relax, heart rate slows, and the brain shifts into recovery mode. If you introduce a large meal at that time, you're going against the very defense system your body has set up for you. And here's the hard truth, in older adults, blood vessels are smaller, stiffer, and more prone to plaque buildup. Just one small push from a spike in insulin or post-meal blood pressure swings can cause vessels in the brain to constrict, experience temporary ischemia, or even suffer micro-tears. You won't feel it immediately. Just some light sleep, morning fatigue, or scattered memory. But if this continues? One night, like Mr. Walter, you may go to bed not knowing you've lost a vital part of your brain. Forever. And you might not even notice it. Because the first signs are so subtle yet deeply alarming. Early warning signs: you're eating dinner at the wrong time. One of the things that troubles me most is how many of my patients have no idea they're damaging their brain every night just by eating too late. There are no loud symptoms. No big warning signs. Just small things, easy to dismiss until it's too late. Have you ever experienced any of these? Trouble falling asleep, tossing and turning, or restless sleep at night? Waking up in the middle of the night to pee, heart pounding, light sweating? Waking up with a heavy head, burning eyes, foggy memory, or low mood? You might think it's aging, insomnia, fatigue, or stress. But in truth, it's the brain's quiet voice. When it's forced to work at the wrong hour, under the wrong conditions, and against the wrong blood rhythm. I once had a 66-year-old female patient, very healthy. She had dinner regularly at 9 p.m. because her husband came home late from work. After a while, she started showing signs of morning confusion, forgetting the stove, and missing appointments. The family thought she was entering early dementia. The result? Just 2 weeks after shifting her dinner to an earlier time, the symptoms faded. No medication. No therapy. Just the brain, finally allowed to rest at the right hour. A man in Florida was once the same until the day he could no longer correct the mistake in time. Mr. Patrick's story: stroke after a 9 p.m. dinner. I met Mr. Patrick for the first time in the ER at 3:20 a.m. He had been brought in with a slow pulse, a sudden spike in blood pressure, and total memory loss. He didn't know where he was. He didn't recognize his wife. He couldn't recall anything from the few hours before. but everything seemed fine the evening before. The family said they had just had dinner at 9 p.m., later than usual, because their daughter got home late. A cozy meal with beef stew, bread, and a little wine. After that, Mr. Patrick watched the news, then went to bed around 11. No warning signs. No pain beforehand. But by 2:45 a.m., he started slurring his speech, struggled to breathe, and then slowly lost consciousness. Our diagnosis was a mild stroke in the hippocampus, the center of short-term memory. The main cause wasn't a ruptured vessel or a major clot, but rising intracranial pressure after the late-night meal, which triggered microvascular spasms as the body entered deep sleep. Fortunately, he was treated in time. After 4 days of monitoring, he mostly recovered, but his short-term memory was no longer intact. He couldn't remember what he said 5 minutes ago. He no longer recognized what day of the week it was. And he kept asking the same question, "What time is it now?" You know that question, which sounds so innocent, is proof of a moment when the brain was left unprotected. And if that dinner had simply been moved 2 hours earlier that night, Mr. Patrick might still remember the name of the granddaughter he loved most in the world. So what is the safest dinner time for the brain to truly rest? The golden hour for dinner and why you should finish eating before 8 p.m. Your body has a secret clock. Not the one you wear on your wrist, but a biological clock in your brain that controls your heart rate, blood pressure, hormones, and even the timing for optimal brain blood flow. That clock runs in sync with light and dark. And right around 8 p.m., the brain begins sending signals to shift into recovery mode. Blood pressure gently drops, blood vessels relax, the brain's cellular detox system activates. But what happens if you eat dinner after 8 p.m.? Simple, you reverse the entire system. Instead of recovering, your body is forced to restart digestion. Instead of relaxing, the heart kicks into higher gear. Instead of letting the brain rest, you push it back into high alert. And here's the key point. The areas of the brain that control memory and emotion are highly sensitive to biological rhythms. If you eat late consistently, you disrupt your brain's clock, your sleep becomes shallow, your nighttime blood pressure doesn't drop as it should, and your risk of stroke quietly increases, night by night, by night. I once asked a patient, "Why do you usually eat after 9 p.m.? He said, "I'm used to watching TV first, then eating." And I replied with this image. Every late meal is like turning on a floodlight in your brain just when it needs the lights off to rest. Golden hour for dinner? Before 7:30 p.m. is best. And if possible, finish all eating by 8 so your brain gets a full night of rest. And if you happen to eat late, there's still a way to reduce the risk that night. If you eat late, what can you do to recover that night? I know this very well. Life doesn't always follow a schedule. Kids get home late, meetings run over, dinner parties, unexpected plans. Sometimes, you'll end up eating after 8 p.m. And that's okay. We don't need to be perfect. We just need to know how to protect our brains in those imperfect moments. Here's what I usually tell older patients if they happen to eat late. 1. Don't lie down right after eating. It sounds simple, but it's extremely important. Stand up and walk slowly for about 10 minutes. This helps prevent blood from pooling in the gut too quickly and keeps the brain from being starved suddenly. 2. Drink a small glass of warm water, just about 100, not too much. Warm water helps slightly thin the blood, supporting easier circulation to the brain during the night. 3. Avoid lying on your left side if you feel full. This position can press the stomach against the heart, sending the brain misleading signals about blood pressure. It's best to sit back gently for 15 minutes before lying down. 4. Practice the 4-7-8 breathing technique before sleep. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 7 seconds, exhale for 8 seconds. It helps calm the central nervous system, relax brain vessels, and promote deep sleep. I never ask patients to change everything in one day. But I always tell them, if you eat late, don't let that lateness drag your brain down with it. Give your brain a lifeline through just a few small actions before bed. Still, the best thing to do is to build a new habit before you have to fix the damage. A 3-step guide to building a healthy dinner routine. I understand that changing your dinner time isn't easy, especially when it's been part of your rhythm for decades. But I've also seen people in their 70s, even 80s, reverse their stroke risk by doing just one thing, eating dinner earlier. And that change doesn't begin with discipline. It begins with a small system your brain can rely on. Step 1. Set a fixed dinner time before 7:30 p.m. It sounds simple, but it's the key. When your biological clock is aligned with your meal time, the body begins scheduling enzyme production, hormones, and brain vessel relaxation accordingly. Set a 7 p.m. alarm each day to start prepping dinner. Step 2. If it's too late, switch to a light meal on nights when dinner must be late. Choose easy-to-digest options, vegetable soup, thin porridge, steamed egg, or a slice of banana. Avoid red meat, heavy starches, or fried foods. The brain doesn't need to be full to sleep, it just needs not to be disturbed further. Step 3. Link dinner time to an existing habit. You don't need to remember everything. Just choose one familiar cue. When you turn off the TV, it's time to set the table. When the kitchen light comes on in the evening, it's time to drink water and wake up the stomach. The brain loves paired habits, and you can reprogram dinner time just like flipping a light switch. After a few days, you'll find it becomes easier, less effort, less remembering because the habit has become automatic. And when eating at the right time becomes part of your rhythm, you'll no longer need to fix things each night, but instead, give your brain a full night of rest, every day. And after just 2 weeks of practice, many have already noticed a clear shift. Deeper sleep. After 2 weeks of change, I still remember the first follow-up visit with Mrs. Kathleen, a 73-year-old patient from Seattle. After hearing my advice about eating dinner earlier, she decided to shift her dinner time from 9 p.m. to 7 p.m. for 2 weeks. No new medications. No supplements. Just one change in timing. She sat down, looked at me, and said with a voice full of quiet surprise, "Doctor, my grandchild said I sleep like a baby now." Then she smiled and softly added, "I can't remember the last time I woke up without a heavy head. Now I finally can." Sounds simple, doesn't it? But deep sleep in older adults isn't just sleep. It's when the brain heals itself, clears cellular waste, strengthens memory, and calms emotions. And that sleep only truly begins when the brain is no longer blocked by a late meal. My patients often describe what it feels like after 2 weeks of eating earlier. I don't wake up in the middle of the night anymore. In the morning, I'm not cranky, my mind feels crystal clear. I remember my medication schedule without my kids reminding me. That's not a miracle. That's rested blood vessels, a steady heartbeat, and a brain that no longer has to stay awake to digest. Just 2 weeks and you'll feel the difference, not because you did something grand, but because you stopped harming your brain a little more each night. Mrs. Sharon was one of those who went through that journey, and she told me something I'll never forget. Mrs. Sharon and the journey of changing dinner time to save her sleep. Mrs. Sharon, 69, living in Oregon, used to believe that insomnia was just part of aging, like wrinkles or gray hair. She accepted it as the price to pay. Until she started forgetting her keys, getting lost in the grocery store, and one night, she woke up at 3 a.m., not knowing which room she was in. That's when her daughter brought her to see me. There was no visible brain damage on the MRI. No signs of Alzheimer's. Just a brain exhausted, deprived of deep sleep for too long, and never truly allowed to rest. When I asked about her eating habits, she said, "I usually eat dinner after my show around 8:30, sometimes 9. I'm not that hungry, but I like eating when everything's quiet. I asked her one question: what if you moved dinner just 1 hour earlier? Just 1 hour, you might feel a part of yourself return. Would you like to try? She nodded. 3 weeks later, she came back. No reminder notes. No one had to accompany her. And before entering the exam room, she asked the receptionist, "Is Dr. Rocker's room playing jazz today?" Her voice cheerful and sharp. I walked in and saw Mrs. Sharon, sitting upright, eyes bright, with a soft smile. She said, "It's true, the brain is thankful when it gets to sleep on time." You were right, doctor. Eating late really does disturb it. Now I don't disturb it anymore, I let it rest. A woman once afraid of memory loss, now teaches her granddaughter how to bake and remembers every recipe, every old song. Not because of pills, but because her brain finally got to eat early and sleep peacefully. I often tell my patients, the brain doesn't ask for anything grand. It just needs one chance to breathe on time. One earlier hour and your brain gains many more years of clarity. If there were a pill that could boost your memory, stabilize nighttime blood pressure, lower your stroke risk, improve your sleep, and even extend the life of your brain cells, would you take it? Believe me, you don't need to look for that pill at a pharmacy. It's simply the act of having dinner 1 hour earlier. I've seen people enter their 70s with sharp minds. And I've also seen 65-year-olds already struggling with foggy memory, shallow sleep, morning headaches, and mild disorientation. The difference isn't always in genetics. It's not luck. It's the quiet choices in how we live. Every late-night dinner is like laying one more brick on the blood vessels of your brain. No pain. No warning. But one day, when the wall grows too high, it blocks out the light of clarity. But just one earlier dinner and you begin to take those bricks down. Each on-time meal becomes a chance for your brain to cleanse toxins, recharge energy, and restore circulation. You don't need to change your entire life. Just change 1 hour in the evening. That 1 hour, if repeated often enough, long enough, can give you back years of life not stolen by the shadows of memory. So start tonight. And if you're still unsure, just remember the final thing I'll say to you. You deserve a brain that rests on time and a mind that stays clear for life. I didn't write this to scare you. I wrote it because I've seen too many good people, too many grandparents, parents, loved ones lose their clarity because of one small habit that got overlooked. And I've also seen many others with just one simple shift, eating dinner 1 hour earlier, gain back deep sleep, sharper memory, and a confident sparkle in their morning eyes. If you've read this far, maybe a gentle question has already formed inside you: could I start again? Tonight? My answer is, yes. You can. And you should. No one is ever too late to care for their brain. No one is too old to reset a rhythm that once, unknowingly, caused harm. Your brain doesn't need anything fancy. It just needs you. To let it rest in time. Every night. Starting today, glance at the clock in the evening. If the hour hand has passed 8, ask yourself, can this meal wait until tomorrow? And if you've already eaten, take a light walk, don't lie down right away. And if you're still healthy, share this with someone you love. Because we're not just keeping ourselves clear-headed. We're preserving memory. So we can continue telling the stories of our lives to the end. If you found this message helpful, leave a comment, "Now I understand why early dinner matters." And share it with someone close, because one on-time meal could save the memory of an entire family. You deserve to live clearly, to live healthily, and to be loved. With the full light of your mind.